If there was one addition to Tarkov that we all knew was coming but didn't have a concrete idea as to when it was going to happen, it was the Cultists. These guys have been alluded to for so long, with the first March room on Customs, a place where, for a long time, the potential for crazy good loot like weapons cases was possible. That room and the circles around the other maps have been reduced in their generosity considerably over the years, but we all knew these mysterious folks would one day make their grand entrance. And oh boy did they. I remember, it was the patch where BSG gave the player base that red AKM and 800 rounds of BP, which was a stupid idea, but regardless, at least that gave us a fighting chance fighting these dudes, because when they came out, they were terrifying. Once that first video of their existence in the game surfaced, it was as if the nighttime raids became something akin to a horror movie. Only located on Customs, shoreline, and woods, the chance of hearing that swiping sound behind you, only to flick your flashlight on and see a silhouette in all black disappear into the night before the hail of bullets and grenades began to surround you. Those guys are no joke. However, things have changed, and to be honest, the Cultists have become quite a letdown over the years. The Cultists, to me, are the prime example of some kind of endgame boss, a super powerful, tricky enemy that is rare and hard to come across out in the world, almost as if they're looking for you and not the other way around. And for the longest time, their mystery was very alluring to everybody. We all wanted to see them come to life in the game, and after their initial launch was insane. They were legitimately scary. Just hearing the sound of the knife swipe behind you before you turn around and they dart away into the bushes before pulling their guns out to mow you down was something to really behold for the first time. It was like an adrenaline pumping experience. And right there, that last part, that's one of the reasons as to why they've kind of lost their luster. They use weapons. I mean, it sounds stupid, duh, it's a shooting game, of course they would. But the problem is that their whole shtick is supposed to be these weird, crazy people that use poison knives and stims and have crazy connections to treasure loot. But normally what ends up happening is that they try to knife you initially, and then if that doesn't work, they run away and switch to weapons, and then the real game begins. If there is one thing I can commend them for, at least when they initially came out, it's that their AI was the most interesting in terms of how they fought the player. Once the real fighting began, they would try to surround you and use grenades and other weapons and sounds to try to throw you off as who was actually looking at you. If you turned the game into a cat and mouse situation, where you felt like you were always on the back foot, and only once you began to thin their numbers did you feel like you even had a remote chance of winning. It was impressive when they came out. Made it feel like there were an army of them when in reality there was only about 4 to 6 cultists at one time. No other AI behaved like that, at the time especially. Not the bosses, not raiders. The cultists were kind of in a league of their own. Now, with the addition of more bosses, the rogues, their AI doesn't feel so special anymore. In fact, it feels as though it's kind of regressed somewhat. They seem less inclined to use their knives and instead just want to shoot you. Which is a shame because it always felt like the knife should be their only weapon, and they should do everything in their power to get a hit so you get poisoned. The cultists also love to kind of just run around and ignore you until they reach whatever destination is required of them before doing a 180 and killing you before their gun is even up in their hands completely. They make no footsteps, and they have insane armor sometimes, making them really tanky. But the guns take the fear away from them somewhat. Speaking of, their gear is something to be brought into question. Originally they had very powerful gear, all different kinds of suppressed weapons with very strong ammos for almost all of them, and not just guns. Their armor options can be strong to this day, up to level 5 and sometimes level 6 armors on those dudes. And while their spawn chances are still single-digit percents, it's still crazy that they have gear this good. While in theory this makes sense for them, it kind of does the opposite in practice. The fear it instills in the player is more so along the lines of their gear is just too powerful versus being afraid because you don't know where they are or how they're surrounding you right before your eyes and you don't even know it. It would have been nice if the focus for the cultists was mobility and stealth and not arbitrary tankiness by way of heavy leveled armor. They have increased HP pools as well, 850 for the priest and the warriors. If it meant these numbers had to be even higher to evoke these emotions I've been talking about, I would kind of be okay with that. Sanitar has 1200 HP, which might be a little too much, so maybe a cool 1000 would do the trick if it meant they didn't have to wear the armor. It would also be nice if they didn't play nicely and rushed you as a group once they were fully aggroed. They kind of file in one at a time as to not overpower the player, which I guess is fair right now, but if they were squishier, they could leverage their numbers to really drive home the idea that they are legion and you are just one person. Sooner or later, you're gonna fall to him. Their poison's not a slouch either. If you get hit by that debuff and don't have the antidote or something to heal the toxin, you will be dead before you even get out of the raid. Some simple ideas and slight tweaks to how they work and behave, and I feel as though maybe Tarkov's most hidden foes might live up to their infamy. Cultists were always an interesting idea, and for the longest time, BSG did a great job of keeping them very close to their chest right up until launch. We really didn't know anything about them, which was impressive, and when they came out, everybody was both excited and terrified at the thought of fighting them. Nowadays, they are still around, people still run into them, but something's different. Maybe it's the tolerance of their existence built up over the years, catching up so they're not scary anymore, or perhaps it's changes all around them in the game that have led to cultists feeling kind of left behind. Either way, they will always be cool, don't get me wrong, but fighting them for a while now hasn't felt good, which makes they themselves not as interesting, engaging, or worth the headache of running around in the dark trying to find them, to only hear the sound of a whiff knife followed by instant death because their aim and overall AI is just as bad as everybody else. But what do you think of the cultists? Are they still interesting to fight, or do you think they're like the rest of the bosses and AIs in the game? Be sure to sound off in the comments and subscribe for more videos about the AI in Tarkov, either feeling great or still feeling like crap after all these years. I hope to see you in future ones.